The US government spent tens of millions of dollars to try to trick the world into believing that a genocide had happened in China, but they couldn't find a single victim. Literally not one. Then 95% of the world's countries refused to support the obviously fake claim. And then the campaign was hit by numerous problems, including several sexual harassment scandals. And finally, in an astonishing twist that nobody could have expected, the China fake genocide story was abandoned even by the Western media when the US was revealed to be deeply involved in a real genocide, with 200,000 real people left dead or injured and their homeland turned to rubble. Now, this is a wild and crazy story and has never been told in this way before. I've got lots of interesting details you won't have heard. Buckle up. First, a quick disclaimer. The full story of the genocide hoax would fill a long book. And the good news is that I know for a fact that precisely those books are being written right now. You'll see them coming out from academics and researchers in the next year or so. But this report has to be relatively short and sweet, so we're going to give you a summary in 10 brief points. A few years ago, both the West and China realized they had to stop terrorist attacks by Islamist radicals. Some Western experts said the answer was re-education camps. The inmates must be taught patriotic duties, the French said. They must raise the flag every morning. People in the community, like teachers, should be trained to spot potential terrorists among young people and tip off the authorities. The government should watch social groups like sports clubs. Now that was in the West. In China, the emphasis was different. The plan was vocational education and training. Some people were given practical skills while others focused on the arts. Language lessons were given to those who needed them. Now, at some point in this process, somebody in Washington DC thought, hey, wait a minute, re-education camps, that sounds bad. Let's switch them and report that China is the one doing re-education camps. China's the one focused on patriotism. China is the place where school children are being watched. I mean, so far so normal. The West projecting their own sins on China is par for the course. They do it all the time. We all know that. But then our friends in Washington decided to ratchet it up. They decided to make China's vocational training courses into internment camps, concentration camps even, places where an entire group of 12 million people were locked up and several million were being killed. And that little switcheroo was the root of a mountain of lies that followed. In 2019, a wealthy CIA-adjacent group called the NED realized that they could exploit China's efforts to solve this problem. Their plan was to get the media to report that China's de-radicalization efforts were actually a program of horrific atrocities amounting to a genocide. By 2019, the press were printing endless reports from 5 human rights projects. The World Uyghur Congress, the Uyghur American Association, the Uyghur Human Rights Project, the Campaign for Uyghurs, and the Uyghur Transitional Database. Western mainstream media staff either didn't know, or they did know but covered up the fact that all of them, not 1 or 2 or 3, but all 5 of them were financed, were rooted in the activities of the NED. Now, don't take my word for that. You can look up your own examples on Google. It will take you seconds. You can see how reporters quote these groups, and you can see how their NED roots and funding are just missing from the articles. Now, why don't you pause this video and check that out for yourself. You done that? Okay, let's carry on. There's a lot of overlap between these groups. 2 main players sprang up all the time. They were a German anti-China campaigner called Dulkan Issa and a US lawyer named Nuri Turkel. Remember those 2 names. Number 2, the NED organised a conference to create the impression that the world was united in global outrage at the alleged program of atrocities. It took place in June 2019 at the George Washington University, and the theme was Confronting Atrocities in China, the Global Response to the Uyghur Crisis. Now, the general official US line was that everything it did to hurt China was actually for China's own good of the people. But NED boss Karl Gershman, who seemed to passionately hate all things Chinese, forgot this, and he said in his opening speech that China should be left on the ash heap of history. He added with a smile, "I believe that will happen." Hard to see that as being good for the residents of China. Oh, we're trying to help you by working to place your country on the ash heap of history. Yes, no need to thank us. Another speaker at the conference was Adrian Zenz, who said that what was really happening was a battle of narratives. Unlike almost everything else Mr. Zenz says, I think this was actually true. There were clearly two narratives. One was China's necessary attempts, perhaps heavy-handed at times, to bring a halt to terrorist violence that had ended up in the killings of many, many, many innocent people. The other narrative was the NED allegation of a genocide, which if it existed would be the strangest genocide in the world, one in which the target group doesn't vanish, but actually expands, both in real terms and in relation to other groups. And you know what's really bizarre? If you look at the data, it would be easier to argue that the Uyghur Chinese were genociding the Han Chinese. I know, right? That's how ridiculous it all was. As well as zero victims, the US campaign lacked any images that looked like concentration camps, so they stole this one. In fact, the picture is from a 2017 roadshow in which a Muslim speaker, Abdul Waiti Saidivakas, visited a drug rehabilitation centre in a place called Kalbag Township. At that venue, the show was stolen by a Muslim prisoner named Aimu, who went on stage to talk about his life. He wept as he spoke, and soon many listeners were weeping too, including his mother, father and brother, who were all there in the audience. Afterwards, Aimu's mother gave the organisers a fabric pennant she'd made at home. It said, "My child repented and woke up today." People in the audience said it was one of the most moving events they'd ever attended. So it's really shocking that they stole this and twisted it to represent something so awful as a genocide. Number 3. A third step was for the Washington DC groups to do what they love to do, fire out vast amounts of US taxpayer cash in all directions. American citizens apparently love to have their money spread thickly across the whole world. In 2020 alone, the NED, according to its own records, handed out $130,000 US to a Uyghur Relief Fund, $147,000 US to an unnamed Uyghur database group, $55,000 US to an unidentified Uyghur artistic project, $170,000 US to Campaign for Uyghurs, run by a woman named Rushan Abbas, who used to work at Guantanamo Bay for the Americans, yeah. $300,000 US for the Uyghur Human Rights Project, run by US lawyer Nuri Turkel, and $400,000 plus US for the World Uyghur Congress, run by Dolkan Issa. I have to admit, I had to have a go at the people trying to push the story of a genocide in which nobody dies, so I made a very short video listing all the victims. It's only a few seconds long. Here it is. Number 4. The Washington meeting was told of a cunning plan. The Americans had long run an inter-parliamentary group to weaponize Tibet. So they decided to repeat the exercise, creating an inter-parliamentary group to weaponize the Uyghur genocide myth. And thus the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, or IPAC, was born, run by a man named Luc de Pulford. The NED gave IPAC a ton of money to run various campaigns, including one attacking China for mass atrocity crimes in the Uyghur region. Except there weren't any. So IPAC had to call the campaign Suspected Mass Atrocity Crimes in the Uyghur region. Lord, give me strength. Number 5. Somebody then pointed out that there needed to be a specific number of dead people, right? And so a number was chosen. This was the number. China had killed more than 6 million Uyghurs. Social media was suddenly just overflowing with this specific allegation, usually in the exact same words. Here, check it out. A message was posted on social media, apparently from an American. China has passed the death count of the Jew victims in the Holocaust. So it was another message using almost the exact same words. China has officially passed the death count of the Jew victims in the Holocaust. And you know what? The flow of almost identical messages just kept on going. China has officially passed the death count of the Jew victims in the Holocaust. China has passed the death count of the Jew victims in the Holocaust.
China has officially passed the death count of the Jew victims in the Holocaust. China has officially passed the death count of the Jew victims in the Holocaust.
Number 6. Now, towards the end of 2020, the NED gave Dulcum Issa another slab of US taxpayer cash, this time to organise a unique tribunal. This was a stroke of genius. Imagine a court case with a prosecutor, witnesses for the prosecution, and presentation of evidence for the prosecution, but no defence of any kind. Oh, and another rule, prosecution witnesses were allowed to receive cash for their testimonies, and they did. I suspect no serious people really believed that 6 million people had been killed or even locked up, but some believed that 2 or 3 million had been. Here's a classic moment from the tribunal.
And some of other states 2 to 3 million. Is there any way you know of? I mean, how do we check which is correct?
We refer to different references, and the data that we have, it's just based on what we have. Could you please repeat your question?
Really, I was trying to get the veracity of what numbers of people have actually been interned or been to these camps.
Okay, as I said, it's 5,567 in total. We don't have this entire millions of references. It's not that everyone can come to us and report the data.
Other American voices joined in. A US representative named Linda Thomas Greenfield said it was definitely true that the Chinese had genocided the Uyghurs. This was ironic because the exact same woman would become infamous worldwide for being the only person to vote at the United Nations against attempts to halt an actual genocide. Yeah, that's her. That's the one. Oh, the irony. But we'll get back to that later. Number 7. Western media lapped up the NED allegations of genocide, but no one else did. Out of 200 countries and territories in the world, only 7 joined the United States in saying that China had committed genocide. Only 7. Canada, UK, Netherlands, Lithuania, France, Belgium and Czech Republic. You know, the vast majority of humanity, the other 190 plus nations, you know, they looked the other way, whistling, feeling probably deeply embarrassed for the few countries backing a genocide that obviously had not happened. Even America's own main legal body refused to support the genocide claim. There was no evidence, they said correctly. What about the databases of Uyghur victims and the police who locked them up? They became a bit of a joke after the random-seeming collection of images were found to contain pictures of Hong Kong celebrities. Number 8. To deal with the problem of 0 deaths, the US started to argue that Uyghur birth numbers had declined, with women maybe having a couple of children instead of 3 or 4 or 5. So children who had not been born could be listed as genocide victims. This argument made no sense because Chinese birth limitations were far less stringent on Uyghur Chinese than they were on Han Chinese. At an international academic conference on this topic, a leading expert on genocide said there had never been a genocide in history in which the only justification for the application of such a label was a limitation on births. Such a thing has never happened and could not logically be argued, he said. I know this for a fact because I was at the conference listening to this discussion. You know, it was really interesting. Number 9. Now we get to another unexpected twist. After the start of the Me Too women's rights movement, there was a wave of women complaining about the behaviour, specifically of men, in the anti-China community of the West. Nathan Law, Hong Konger, was suspended from Washington DC anti-China group after accusations of sexual harassment. And other prominent men rapidly disappeared from sight too. If you want that story, names and details, I covered that in a separate report. But unfortunately for the Zero Deaths genocide campaign, the two most prominent NED people were both soon in very hot water. Yes, Dolkan Issa of the World Uyghur Congress, he was accused of making numerous inappropriate approaches to a student working for him. At the time, she was just 22 and he was 53, so very, very creepy. Once this news came out, at least two other females said he had made sexual approaches to them. Now, he apologized for his actions and was quickly taken out of the spotlight for an investigation. The other big name in these NED-financed Uyghur clusters was Nuri Turkal, a US lawyer. It emerged that he also had a terrible reputation for the way he treated women. One woman named Julie Millsap, who worked with him at Uyghur Human Rights Project, expressed dismay about the stories she was aware of about the way he preyed on women. The general feeling in the project was that well, Julie should know, as she used to be his partner, right? Mr. Turkal was also quickly whisked off the stage. The NED project had lost its genocide and its two biggest names. Where to go from there? Number 10. By the end of 2023, the whole thing became absurd. Western politicians and Western media abruptly stopped talking about the Zero Deaths fake genocide in China because a real live genocide was playing out in real time, on everyone's mobile phone. It would have been the height of absurdity to continue arguing that an event in which literally nobody died should be classified as a genocide, while denying the same label to the horrific slaughter of people in Gaza, carnage in which we could all see corpses of women and children live streamed on our phones every day, week after week, month after month. The whole world wanted to stop that, and, irony of ironies, the woman given the job of holding up her hand against all the other countries of the world who wanted to stop what the UN said was a genuine genocide was Linda Thomas Greenfield. Yes, the woman mentioned earlier. If there was a competition for Hypocrite of the Year, or Decade, or maybe Century, I think Miss Thomas Greenfield has a right to that title. Let's finish this on a happier note. America's anti-China operatives tried to relaunch the Uyghur fake genocide story with another one saying that another minority group, the Hoi Muslims of China, were being erased. Or maybe I should say erased, because they used a question mark. Because they knew that this was not remotely true. You can go and talk to them. Not one mainstream media outlet picked up that story. That campaign was abandoned. Now let's finish this with some Uyghur voices. Peace.
First of all, do not talk shit about our country. Yep. But if you want to be bad-mouthing about your own country, feel free to do that.